We are here. It is Wednesday night. We are doing the show that everybody knows is called Hey, Did You See This One? And this week, we have a very special June Henson produced movie. It's actual Jim Henson movie called Hey, The Dark Crystal. It doesn't have a hey in it. I don't know why I said that. My brain
It's the Dark Crystal.
You got putting hay on everything now.
My brain is completely fried. I think it's cooking inside my skull because it went up to 35 today and my apartment is still about 35 degrees, if I was to guess.
Yikes.
But our thermostat's broken, so I can't even check. So before we move forward, I'm gonna check the audio, make sure that you guys can hear me on the thing, because I did mute my audio completely.
I can hear you on the stream.
You can hear me on the stream?
Yes.
Because on Monday night we did the trailer show and I was
I bet it makes for a funny episode though.
No, it's just like it'll be like one of you asks a question and then I just go.
And we're both like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like some Andy Kaufman type of comedy.
Yeah, except for way more subtle. And
so subtle we didn't even know we were doing it.
Yeah. So this movie's from the 1980s. It is
1982.
I believe that.
Yeah, it is basically the 70s. I would like to know your guys' history, because I'm just gonna go first because mine's the quickest. I have these weird like memories of seeing this and seeing Labyrinth and seeing Neverending Story all around the same time, because I would have been like 5 years old in 1990. So I think all three of those movies had been out by that point. And they kind of all just bleed together. But this one I remember the absolute least. I feel like I've never actually seen it. And if I have seen it, I saw it when I was before my brain came online, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I was still in that theta wave part of my life where you don't really have
that
developing
self-awareness yet.
Yeah, you don't have that sentient being.
You're in here, it's like a
process.
Computer going through an update mode. You're so stuck in update mode for 5 years.
But you're just pure, it's all learning. It's like AI. In fact, we might be in a simulation in the first 5 years is the AI coming on board. Oh, Kaylin's mind's a little bit blown by that.
A little bit, yeah.
But that's pretty much it for me. Labyrinth and Neverending Story are both movies that I've gone back and seen throughout the years. My last time I saw Neverending Story, I was actually in Costa Rica, and we were staying at this like Airbnb kind of thing in this like little it was an old resort that was just converted into like a small Airbnb, and there was like kids night, and all the kids from like the locals came and watched Neverending Story with the people staying in like the hotel motel kind of thing, and it was a neat experience. Me and Madison ended up staying for the whole movie, so that was cool. And Labyrinth, of course, I've talked about it on a couple different shows. I watched that when I was a teenager, all stoned. So I'll pass it over to you, Cage, UK land.
Oh, hello. This is my first time seeing the movie. I'm not even sure if I've ever even, like, the cover doesn't look familiar to me. The name, I think, like, kind of sounds familiar. I think I saw Neverending. I'm pretty sure I saw Neverending Story. What's the other one? Labyrinth?
Falcor! You don't remember the kid yelling Falcor, and then also, spoilers, his horse dies in quicksand?
Sorry, his horse was named Artax. Please.
Sorry.
Respect the dead.
His horse. Named Horse.
I might do something like that. Just name things what they are. Kind of like that dragon from Dragonheart, Draco, but it's just like a different name for dragon.
Or How to Train Your Dragon, where it's just the dragon's name is, I don't know. Sorry.
Toothless, because he has no teeth.
I was riffing, but Steve once again has to tell us what the reality is.
I like dragons.
Hey, did you see this one on Wednesday night at 9:15?
Someone's got to bring us on point. I'm sober tonight. Um, I don't have a nostalgic connection to this movie, which watching it now at 35, I appreciated the craftsmanship of it. Like it was basically the main thing for me. I watched it.
Something tells me that that's going to be the majority of our conversation this evening is about the craftsmanship and not much else.
Yeah, and me relating it literally every frame back to Final Fantasy, which I took extensive notes
that's
on,
actually that's what I'm excited for this episode, is to hear how you're connecting it to Final Fantasy. I don't want to shit on this movie at all, but it's not for me. I'll say that much. And I don't have the nostalgic connection to it, so there's that much more of a disconnect. But it was well done, especially for early. I mean, I have always been a fan of like practical over CGI, regardless of what decade it is. Like I prefer it. There's just a preference or whatever. I mean, even as CGI gets better and better and better, it's definitely more seamless and seamless. You still know it's not real. Like you still can't touch it or whatever. It's not tangible. So I give this points for that for sure. Steve,
why don't you tell us about it?
Give us some
tell us all about it. Tell us all about your relation to Frank Oz too, because he said a lot of times in this movie.
Yeah, Frank Oz co-directed the movie.
Jim played the main character, like he puppeteered or whatever.
They didn't do a lot of the voices. A lot of the voices were done in VO after the fact. Because I think they did record a lot of the dialogue on set, but they ended up having to go back and redo a bunch of it because it just didn't sound good. Anyway, my first time seeing this movie was Sunday. I have seen bits and pieces of it before in the past. It was on TV a lot when I was a kid, but I'd always kind of catch it in the middle. Like I would never be able to, you're a kid, you don't really think about like, oh, it starts at this time. And also it wasn't one of those movies that my parents were like, you gotta watch this shit.
Unless it was Full House. I knew when that shit was on like clockwork.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay.
Did you guys ever measure time by episodes of
Full House
shows? Like it'll be
Matters.
2 shows, it'll be 3 shows.
Yeah, my parents, anytime I was like, how long until we get to the destination? They'd be like 2 episodes of the Power Rangers or whatever.
35 Power Ranger episodes. And I'd be like, no,
that's so many. But like I said, I'd seen a bunch of it in chunks as a kid, but I didn't have the same sort of nostalgic connection that a lot of people do. And I noticed just like going through everyday life, there are people who are absolutely obsessed with the Dark Crystal. And like the TV show came out a couple of years ago, and I was working at a nerd bar at the time. And I remember the people that are slightly older than me were just like so excited for this show. And I was like, I mean, it looks cool. Puppets are cool. But watching the show with no context, I was kind of like, I don't know what is going on. And even as the show's explaining to me, I'm like, I don't think this show is for me. And I felt the same way when I was watching the movie as well. It's super simplistic, very cut and dried, good versus evil, dark and light. It's all just like the most basic storytelling elements. And you don't end up feeling super emotionally connected to anyone. Which sort of leaves the movie feeling a little bit hollow in the end. But like, again, it's a kid's movie. You're not really supposed to be overwhelmed with like the deep thought that went into everything. It's just sort of like, it's for kids.
Well put.
But it's also really creepy and like spooky. And within the first, 5-10 minutes of the movie, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, I feel like I would be in danger as a child watching this of having nightmares, because it's pretty nasty. The Skeksis are all gooey and like dry at the same time, like they're dripping, but they're also like when they die they turn into dust.
There was more nudity in this movie than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like when Chamberlain got his clothes all pulled off and he had like 30 nipples.
Yeah.
Before we get into the ball, sorry, were you done, Steve?
No.
Yeah.
This kind of pertains to the intro bit, but have you guys actually, like, Steve, you said you watched a bit of the show and kind of were like, meh. Kaylin, I know you like to like complete viewings. Did you watch any of the TV show?
That is a good point. You guys mentioned something about a show. Actually, I think I saw something on Netflix about Dark Crystal series or whatever. I haven't checked it out though.
So when it came out, I remember having the same sort of thought process that Steve had, but I'm a completionist in that I need to. The reason why I can't watch Doctor Who is because I've said this on the show before. I can never go back and fully experience it from the beginning because there's literally blocks of episodes that died in a fire. There was a fire at the BBC. There's episodes that were only transcribed once on one videotape or whatever, one reel, and they were destroyed for time. And there's no way to get that back. I'm sure that they you could read the script if you wanted to. There's probably ways around it, but that's not my viewing process. And when that show came out, it was very much back when Netflix was still very good. Everything they were putting out was like everybody loved. I remember it being like one of those shows where everybody's like, Dark Crystal's back, it's amazing, it looks cool, blah blah blah. And I didn't end up watching it, but the thing is this movie, it's visually interesting enough that I kind of want to watch the first episode of the Dark Crystal TV show just to see if they actually were able to evolve the puppeteering that much. Because what I suspect happened when this movie came out is it was such a leap in puppeteering and special effects and practical effects that it went from being bleeding edge, cutting edge the year it came out, and every subsequent year after it came out, it got creepier and creepier to the point where us elder millennials look at it and go, it came out 3 years before I was born. I'm the oldest, right? So for you guys, 4 years and 5 years. And you get to this older age, and for instance, my wife comes downstairs and I'm like, do you want to watch the end of Dark Crystal with me? And she's like, no, it makes me uncomfortable. And I think that animation and the puppeteering of a lot of it just makes our brains revert to that, like being a kid, those weird puppet movies that were always on in varying degrees of quality. Dark Crystal was probably on all the time, and just we have like weird brain sensations and aversions to this kind of animation, because I kept in my notes, I kept writing, this is for kids. The storytelling is so simplistic and basic, but at the same time, the imagery is like horrifying. So I almost feel like the Dark Crystal could have been R-rated. It feels a lot like R-rated. Feels a lot like a Studio Ghibli movie in a lot of ways, is what I was.
Well, yeah, that's kind of Frank Oz's whole, or not Frank Oz, but Jim Henson's whole thing is that he wanted to make movies that weren't necessarily like safe Disney, strictly for children kind of thing. Is like his whole sort of philosophy behind it was children. It's unhealthy for children to never be scared. You should present them with uncomfortable or in some cases horrifying imagery within their content, because if everything is a fluffy chipmunk constantly all the time, they're not going to have a contrast. And so when they are truly met with something horrifying in real life, they're not going to be able to have that sort of buffer emotionally. I think
most 80s and early 90s filmmakers and television makers had that mindset too, because you go back and watch some of these things that were rated PG even, and it's like, this is nowadays closer to an R. An R there, you friggin'.
No, I wasn't laughing at your pronunciation of R. I was laughing that you said this should be rated R, or could be rated R.
I don't mean this particular. I don't mean the Dark Crystal.
Quentin Tarantino presents the Dark Crystal.
He just recuts it and puts a bunch of weird nudity and gore.
There's a little bit of blood in this movie.
Yeah.
And a little bit of nudity, but yeah. I mean, I agree with most of what you said, but like this one again, like you were saying, you have these sort of like fragmented memories of it from when you were a kid, but like I'm pretty sure I tried to watch it as a kid and I just got kind of bored. I didn't really find it to be as compelling as something like the Neverending Story, where you're moving from sort of biome to biome within the story, and it's presenting you with these new visuals.
And it's more of a travel adventure thing. Like this one's a very short travel adventure through a small forest and then like kind of up a mountain, and that's it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's a vastness to the world. The world feels very small.
And you get the impression from people who love this movie that it is like that, but I think they might be confused with the Neverending Story, because
there's probably like so much lore and stuff that we don't even really know about. Like I did watch a couple episodes of the show, and your sort of sorry, your question as to whether or not the puppeteering has improved, the answer is of course. Like it's like almost 30 years of pioneering versus like development and improvement upon an existing sort of art form, right?
The reason why I asked though is the thing that I noticed the most is that watching this in high def, it almost looks like a modern movie that looks aged down versus some things that you put in high def and it ages them even worse than they are. This looked like it could have been somebody made it to look like this because the puppeteering and the ideas while they're going through the forest, like I just keep thinking over and over the scene where you just get a shot of the woods and then this like weird like creature is like a plant, but then it's a creature and it walks away, and then this like little dinosaur dude's running through the woods and he stands in what you think is just like an opening of like a rock, and then the rock eats him. And that's when I was like, this is Studio Ghibli movies have this same, like they just cut to like the forest being the forest, especially Princess Mononoke, right? Like
the sort of like tranquil chaotic energy, where it's just fantasy, we're in a fantasy world.
How did they make those little critters run around?
String. They just pulled them.
Was it string?
Yeah. There was a lot of moments.
It looked like it might have been more than just string, though. Like it didn't. You know what I mean? Like it didn't look that simple.
Yeah, there's probably
sometimes sometimes if something looks very simple, it is very simple. You know, like especially in the world of puppeteering. But
think about it like this, though. It's like there for every moment that looked cool because they figured out some trick. There were moments that looked literally like Team America. Like when they're riding those things towards the end, the tall, like I don't want to say horses, but like they're basically horses. And they just show like wide shots of them riding. The puppet sitting on top is just going like.
We've been called simple by the chat. We're
simple.
We look like simple puppet people.
I'm a simple puppet man, Miyagi. Thanks for joining, Miyags. Have you seen The Dark Crystal? Oh yeah, we'll address the chat later.
Well, maybe we address the chat during this episode because who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe they'll help liven it up.
Do you want me to do?
We'll glance over it every once in a while.
I'm gonna try something new. I'm not gonna just read through the whole plot. I'm going to read one paragraph of the plot at a time this time. So it's not just me reading to the stream. You want to try this?
Let's try that.
Okay. Yeah. It's a story in 4 acts, let's say. So 1,000 years ago on the planet Thra, 2 new races appeared when a shard was shattered from the crystal of truth. The cruel Skeksis, who are continued corruption of the crystal to extend their lives, and the gentle Uru, more commonly known as mystics, who make their home in the Valley of Stones to await their destiny. The leader of the mystics, the master Ursu, raises a young Gelfling named Jen, whose clan was slaughtered by the Skeksis. As the great conjunction of Thra's 3 sons draws near, a dying Ursu instructs Jen to fulfill a prophecy to heal the crystal by first retrieving the shard from Agra. If Jen fails to complete his quest before the 3 sons meet, the Skeksis will rule forever. As Ursu passes, the Skeksis emperor, Skekso
the Wise,
also dies, leaving the position of the leader vacant. The Chamberlain,
the queen?
Skekso,
the emperor, the guy who turns to dust in like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was a joke. I really liked that shot a lot. That was really well done.
And the Gartha master Skekung challenge each other, trial by stone for succession. Confusing. I have a theory about why that was made the way it was, resulting in Skekung defeating Skeksil. Skeksil is stripped of his robes and banished, while Skekung is proclaimed the new
weird
emperor.
That they keep. Oh, this is the Wikipedia page you're reading, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't capture any of those names while watching the movie. I just called them General and what was the other guy's position?
Chamberlain. I thought his name was Chamberlain.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like a dig at wasn't there like a politician or something?
Or a Chamberlain is a position within.
Yeah, it's the chamber person.
Okay.
When the Skeksis learn of Jen's existence, they send the army of giant crab-like Garthim to capture him, with the cunning Skeksil following. So that's the first, that sort of opens up the movie. Miyagi asks, anyone find it hard, difficult to get into puppets? I know a lot of people love this, including my partner, but I find it hard to get into. And I think that's
like to put it on.
I don't have a difficulty with it. It's just sometimes you need a live action person to pull you back into reality, and then because it just after a while it gets a little bit overwhelming, and you do just feel like you're watching a kid's thing.
I forgot that there were no people in this, and I forgot that this was the one where the humanoid creature people, the Gelflings or what, Gelflings. Yes. They look, they're the most unsettling thing in a world of Ursus and fucking Skeksis.
What was unsettling? They're like little like kangaroo people or something.
Say that to yourself again and don't get
they're little kangaroo people.
Look you can see on Steve's screen that Kira looks.
Yeah, it kind of looks like Cardi B kind of looks like a Gelfling.
That's true. If you, she just got a whole, she just got a whole bunch of like face injections and lip implants. But the thing that unsettled me the most is the puppeteering in the faces for like the ridiculous looking creatures had so much more points of articulation, and their eyes looked a lot more expressive. And the Gelflings, except for one scene where Jen like crinkles his nose in disgust, the rest of the time he was just like, "Hey guys, how are you doing?"
Yeah, they look like
that's a good point.
Just like mannequin mouth. Yeah, it's it's hard to the believability is not as it's not as compelling as it was when you were a child to see a puppet talking when it's got no articulation in its features and stuff. Because like the bigger they make a puppet, the more they can make it move. Like even in something that came out not too long after this, or was it before Gremlins? When did Gremlins come out?
That's 1984, isn't it, or 1983? And those are different. Those are like
after.
Those are like
Gremlins,
like
84.
I think they were animatronic. They were
but one trick that they would one trick they would do in that is they would build a super oversized gizmo,
right?
So they could do the close-ups, and it's like basically like an enormous gizmo, and it had lots of articulation in the mouth and eyes and stuff, and it reads better, obviously, than just a sock puppet, basically, with a bunch of hair on it.
And there were those two scenes. Oh,
just saying, Miyagi says, a good point. When you're a kid, it's awesome, and he's just lost the magic, and that might be what's happened to us a little bit.
Yeah, I think we'll probably have a little bit more fun with the next one because of
David Bowie,
the magical man himself.
Being a sexy pervert.
Would you like to see my
He's not a pervert, is he?
Look at my bulge. Why am I going after a 16-year-old girl?
Because I want to marry her.
Because I need to become the Goblin King.
Anyway, I'm sure we'll get a lot of that out of our system next week. So yeah, I mean, there's like some interesting points about this movie that can be made that are not particularly the story, or just like the fact that Frank Oz, he did not just want to do Muppets constantly all the time, even though that's what ended up happening because that's all anybody wanted to give him money for. Even the distribution of this film, they had a bunch of notes that he had to meet in order to get full distribution, but he ended up just buying the distribution rights and distributed it himself because he's like, whatever, I'm not changing it.
But here's the thing, the technology almost like wasn't there for it as much as we've praised how good it looks. I think that they did the trial by stone. This is goes back to my little theory that I have. I think they did the trial by Jason's theory corner. I should make a little I should make a thing for it, a title card. But the reason why I think that is because it looked so ridiculous when they just clanged swords that they had to do this like whoever can cut the rock in half bit. Because if they tried to have these two puppets fight each other, I don't know. It would, because when it cuts to Jen running away later, there's one scene where he runs and jumps out a window, and it's clearly just a little person or even just an actor.
I think it's there is a few scenes where it's
the rock thing. I think the rock thing is cool.
But I agree with you. I agree with you that it is cool and it's different. I think
it's a solution to a problem.
I think that there were plans to make these motherfuckers fight each other.
Most definitely there were, and they realized we can't do it. Yeah, let's make up a weird lore thing where they have to smash a rock with a sword. But I kind of like that. It's like a weird sort of like ritualistic thing that seems like these gross bird people who
Yeah.
don't look like they could fight each other anywhere, just like who's
Simple way to
able
fight,
to hit
yeah.
this rock better. And I like that
Yeah.
it's been like mashed on for what seems like generations. Like it's just this stone they have.
And he
Cool.
finally bashes it to bits.
It's like a reverse sword in the stone.
Yeah. It was a neat
Yeah.
it was a neat little moment, but I immediately thought they were gonna fight, and before when he poked him, he pokes him and he's like, haha, pokes him, and then they clang swords.
You weakling. Yeah.
I was like, there's no fucking way that they're gonna make this look right. But the movie isn't bad and it's not cheesy, and they don't take shortcuts like that. Everything looks the way it's supposed to look, in my opinion. The problem with the movie is just it's a kids movie, but it might be too frightening for kids. So like, who's this movie for? Kind of thing. Like,
well, I mean, it is for kids. Like
midnight movies.
We sit here as adults being like, this might be too frightening for kids, but like this is what kids movies were. The Nightmare Before Christmas. I mean, that also
is terrifying.
Some people would say that's too scary for kids, but I watched that as like a 5-year-old, and I was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's true.
Yeah,
I got it for VHS for Christmas, and I put it in, and all my cousins ran out of the room, and it was just me being like, "This is Halloween, 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 Halloween." So it's like these types of movies are for a specific type of kid, and I think that's what Jim Henson was really good about, is he's like, I am making a movie for a specific type of kid, and
they're made for weirdo kids who grow up to like have seen, in my case, every TV show in existence, and in your guys' cases, every movie in existence, and then they get together to do a podcast where their brains are filled with creative theories.
Well, eventually
about
kids become bigger kids.
That's true, and they don't age past about 15, because that's where I stopped evolving. Now I just have I'm like, well,
that's not true. Remember when we did the Trey Parker Matt Stone month, and you had an epiphany about yourself? You're like, I think my sense of humor has evolved.
I think I don't find the same dick joke 5 times in a row as funny anymore. And Cannibal the Musical is my favorite out of those movies during that period. So you're right.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there is lots of stuff that you can say about this movie that elevates it above other kids movies of the era. I prefer this over watching some of the old Muppet movies. One thing about this movie is that there isn't really any levity at all. Like, it's a kids movie with no jokes. It's like deadly serious, and everything is very much like, it's a fantasy story about fantasy creatures in a fantasy world, and nobody is laughing. There's that one joke.
I'm not sure if it was meant to be a joke, but
just because you laughed at something doesn't mean it's a joke.
You have wigs? I don't have wigs. Of course not. You're a boy.
Yeah. I think that was lore building. I think a legitimate joke though was the thing running across and standing in the rock, and the rock closing on him. And also the whole fizz gig, whatever, the ball of fur with the double mouth. Yeah. That thing I think was the comic relief while he was on screen. Yeah. Because I wrote in my notes, I was like, Fizzrig is my hero. I don't know why. I just gravitate to weird tertiary characters in film. And Miyagi says, yeah, kids can handle it. It'll just expand their minds, man. So yeah,
I agree.
A good point, Steve.
They need it. They need developing. They need to
be exposed to different
stimuli.
Things. If you just just show kids the same shit over and over again, then they're not going to become creative people.
Ironically enough, I can talk a lot of talk about what kids should and shouldn't see, but if I was a parent, I would be the one being like, hey, check this out. Watch this ridiculous thing from my childhood and see if it messes you up like it messed me up. You want to watch all of Pee Wee Herman? You want to watch all of Pee Wee Herman? We're watching all of Pee Wee Herman. I'm not explaining any of the jokes.
The show or the movie? Because the show is hilarious.
All of it, even the Broadway thing that's mostly adult jokes, but it still plays for kids.
The movie's great. Tim Burton.
Yep.
So one of the things that inspired this movie actually was the artwork of Brian Froud, who is like
not Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy came after.
We'll get into that, Kaylin. I know you're excited, but
he was like a prod. I'm just trying to.
You're trying to derail, is what you're trying to do. He was like a prestigious and predominant fantasy illustrator of the time, and Jim Henson. I think saw like an illustration in a book, and he's like, oh man, and he started writing the script, and then he was like, you know what, I'm going to see if this guy wants to come in and do all the conceptual designs and stuff for the creatures, and he did. And he came in and worked on the labyrinth as well afterwards, and he has like a huge, like what's the word I'm looking for?
Ego?
No, like
an
omnibus.
Yeah,
it's
like a show
tome.
Bible.
Yeah, it's like a tome of artwork for all the Dark Crystal world. But yeah, it's really cool to look at as well. If you just kind of, I was looking at a little bit of stuff before this, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I can see why he brought him on and kept him. And I know that the three of us didn't really enjoy this movie all that much, but it is kind of one of those things where you're like, I wonder what Jim Henson, they have the same amount of syllables and flow to their name, and they're both dark weirdos at heart. Just kind of makes me wonder what else he would have done, because Labyrinth is sort of the next step in this direction, except I think he kind of learned from mistakes.
Better, yeah.
And he had talked about before he died making not a sequel but another story set in the same world of the Dark Crystal, which is pretty cool. And then the Netflix show, I guess, didn't really learn anything from that. They're like, no, let's just make a sequel. Or I think it's a prequel. I don't even know what it is.
It's just called like The Next Revelation or some shit. So
it's called the Resistance or something, or like the Revolution or Revelations, or I can't remember.
Revolutions.
Age of Resistance.
More
Dark
things.
Crystal Age of Resistance.
More things.
But like, I know in the beginning it says that the two races, the Skeksis and the Mystics, came out of like the shattering of the crystal. I always kind of thought of this as they were one race, and the Dark Crystal shattering turned them into two races, because they do look similar, like they have big, large bodies and like beak-like faces.
Kind of vulture.
Also the ending, where they literally
go back to one.
Combine.
True. Yeah. I had another thing I was going to say, but I can't remember. Move on. Okay. I like that all the planets look like an eyeball.
Well, that's true. Can I get into a little bit of the Final Fantasy stuff? I'll get it out of the way. I won't make it too long-winded. But it has to do directly with an image I'm going to put into my background as I slowly get to it. Now, for fuck's sakes.
What is that, Link?
It down? No, it's not Link. So there's a race in Final Fantasy, in Ivalice. In Final Fantasy,
can you make it a smaller picture?
Tactics in Final Fantasy 12 that look exactly like the what are they called?
Mystics.
Yeah, the Mystics that are also called the Uru. Uru sounds a lot like Numu. And what I noticed is I think that there are sort of three kinds of fantasy fiction. And their origins go back to basically, 60s sci-fi, which turns into like movies like Battlestar, original Battlestar, and Star Wars. And then you have high fantasy, which is directly transcendent of Lord of the Rings. And then you have weird, middling sci-fi fantasy, which this doesn't have a lot of sci-fi, but it has a little bit of steampunk. But the Final Fantasy games all kind of fall into this Dark Crystal sort of version of fantasy. I'm not a fan of high fantasy. I don't like swashbuckling swords and like basic magic and like riding horses and chivalry and shit. I like it when
you don't like chivalry. You don't open the door pull the seat open for your missus.
Yeah, good luck actually doing that and not getting yelled at, because don't be a weirdo in public. But
what, to hold a door or
hold the door for everybody? Hold the door,
guys.
For
this is not the place or time to have this discussion.
My point is this is the kind of fantasy I am actually drawn to traditionally. So as much as I did have problems with the story, it is the very core of almost every single Final Fantasy game in the whole Final Fantasy mythos. Each Final Fantasy game is its own story, but there are a lot of things that tie them together. The most basic story, Final Fantasy 1, is literally 4 warriors of light set on a journey to bring the 4 crystals of the elements back together because there's a super bad guy who's trying to summon another super bad guy. Final Fantasy 2, basically an emperor, so on and so forth. A lot of the imagery you'll see reused through the Final Fantasy games directly from Dark Crystal. That when they go to the laboratory with what's her name? Also, why were her nipples? Agra.
Agra, there we go.
Agra. Why were her nipples so pronounced? But she looked like a monster woman and
Those
had
weren't
crazy
nipples.
horns. Oh, they were boob claws.
They were crystals. Dark crystals.
Not to like. First and foremost, the whole crystal thing, it runs through all the games. But in Final Fantasy 9, right, or Final Fantasy 7, sorry, you go to a very similar observatory where an
Called
ancient...
an Auri. It's not a laboratory. It's an Auri.
I said, okay, an Auri or a observatory, whatever. On top of a mountain.
An observatory is where you observe the stars, and an Auri is where you predict the movement of the stars.
Okay, thank you, Mr. D&D.
Or celestial bodies, if you will.
Anyway, you go to the city of the ancients in Final Fantasy 7. You go into this. Miyagi's just laughing at me while I try to piece this together. But essentially, you get the same scene, and also Final Fantasy 9 aesthetically looks like the Dark Crystal. So anyway, that's basically all I wanted to say about that. But the new Mu look exactly like the Uru or whatever they're called. And I also just wanted to say that, and I think that I like the Dark Crystal as an idea or a theory or a creation of lore to like draw.
Well, then you should check out the show. You might like it.
That's what I'm saying.
The show is not bad. Like, I just didn't really get into it, and I watched more than one episode because I was like, oh, this is intriguing. I just kind of fell off of it.
I was trying to keep an open mind for the boringness of this movie by pretending I was watching a Final Fantasy spin-off thing or a prequel. Or
that's how you get into every movie. You're like, just imagine it's Final Fantasy.
How do I relate this?
You're like, man, Alfred Hitchcock's classic Psycho is so boring. I just have to imagine all these people as Final Fantasy characters.
Well, Kaylin wants to Muppetize everything. I want to Final Fantasy-ize everything. But that's my rant about it being basically the prototype for a lot of the, like, when you see a Final Fantasy game look kind of old school, they don't really do medieval high fantasy ever in Final Fantasy games, or very seldomly. It's usually mixed with like sci-fi or mixed with like futurism. The weird fantasy part looks a lot like the Dark Crystal, and the crystal theme was jacked directly from this, definitely, because the fact that he had to find a piece of a crystal that completes another crystal is the most video game shit ever.
Yeah, I don't think that Final Fantasy was the only one to pull from the Dark
Definitely
Crystal.
Not.
I also don't think the Dark Crystal was the only thing that Final Fantasy is pulled from. They
Zifrit,
love shit.
Zifrit says, watches wrestling. This is Final Fantasy.
This is Final Fantasy.
I'll get into that too. Here's the thing about professional wrestling. It's live action comic books, not unlike anime. It's kind of anime. So
everything's like anime if you think hard enough.
Race car. I want to watch a NASCAR anime where they fucking go into like super
It's called
mode.
Speed Racer.
Oh
it
yeah,
exists.
and F-Zero. And F-Zero.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my Final Fantasy corner. There's going to be more.
How do I get out of this corner?
There's going to be at least next week.
People keep
this might be the
into
earliest movie title shout out. I'll have to go through my notes, and maybe at the end of the season I'll do like the top, like the quickest, earliest movie title shout outs. 2 minutes and 32 seconds.
The Dark Crystal was a crystal 1,000 years ago.
It was so dark. I gotta say though that the opening sting of the music is just like, okay, here we go. I'm being transported to a fantasy world, all right.
But then the quiet chaos sets in. Another little thing that I noticed is this is the kind of movie you could watch with your kid on like a Sunday afternoon when you're all hungover, and it gets real quiet a lot, so the kid might like, pass out.
And if you're hungover, you'll also pass out.
And you'll
also why are you hungover if you have kids?
Well,
shouldn't be getting drunk if you've got
my
kids
parents,
around.
I just see what I know, and my parents.
I see. Okay.
used to put on Star Trek, so I'd pass out, and I hate Star Trek.
Oh, that's what I do now. That's how I pass out now. I put on the Star Trek to pass out. Captain
The
Picard would
movie?
say, "All right, Picard, take
The
me home."
TNG specifically.
Next Generation.
Make
I
it
just have
so,
these
and I fall
weird
asleep.
memories that are similar to the way that we're remembering this movie, where it's just like, boop, boop. I know that's TOS, but
Old
Star Trek,
yeah.
Star Trek has its own, or TNG has its own version of that. That's just sort of like
it's just beeps.
like the hum of the spaceship, and
It's
then
a hum with
Worf being
some
like,
beeps.
"I'm Worf." Yeah,
You have no honor.
number one.
Captain, why must I wear this hat?
What were you drawing before the pod, Steve?
I'm working on an outro for one of the videos for one of the chapters. It's chapter 18. It's a pub.
Is that glove for like monitor screens or whatever?
It's just so it helps my hand glide across my tablet without
yeah, to like tablet screen.
It's like so much friction on my hand that I can't get the smoothest of the line. Sometimes my hand gets sweaty.
For some reason I thought it was for like pencil or whatever. It's like you don't like
I use it with my pencil sometimes too, because it actually helps from smudging the lead. And then when I use my iPad, you get so many smudges on it, so the glove just doesn't smudge your screen.
Jen meets Agra and enters her Ori, which she uses to predict the heavens, and she explains about the conjunction before having Jen select the correct shard. Before Agra can explain Jen's mission, the Gathrum arrive and destroy the Ori. Another thing about the Gathrum, they look exactly like antlions from every Final Fantasy game. They live in the desert and they look the same.
I just feel very vindicated that you just had to say the word Ori more than once in a sentence.
It's true. It's true. If I would have just read like 2 seconds later, I would know that it's not called a laboratory or an observatory, but in fact an Ori. Taking Agra prisoner as Jen flees. Hearing the call of the crystal, the mystics leave their valley to return to the castle of the crystal. On the journey through a forest swamp, Jen meets Kira, another surviving Gelfling. The two learn more about each other when they accidentally dream fast. That scene reminded me of Avatar a little bit, sharing each other's memories. They stay for a night with the podlings, gnomes, who raise Kira, only for them and Kira's pet Fizzgig to flee with the Githrum raid when the Githrum raid the village. They are nearly caught, but Skeksis intervenes, keeping the Githrum from pursuing them.
Which is the Chamberlain, right? He's like after he gets banished or whatever.
Yeah. So let's talk about that the next little bit of the movie, because things are picking up. There's a bit of intrigue finally happening, and the Dream Fast was a real like lore dump, because you get to see basically their whole lives. They both got separated in a massive, I think they got raided or something at their camp, and then they got split up and lived with two different races of being in this world. The Kira's family were basically the gnomes of this world, and Jen's family were the new move from Final Fantasy 12. Do you have any comments about that, or do you want me to just move to the next
Beatles
part?
look cool. I like the Beatles.
The guards or whatever, like those
the big beetle monsters.
Yeah, like
you can't tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. There's just giant beetles that chase them around. Crab beetles.
Crab beetles.
The ones that the Skeksis sent after them,
yes,
right?
The big monsters that look like beetles. I remember in the show that was like the one time that I was like, oh, they do have a bit of CGI going on here, and it was just to like make the legs look good. Like everything is pretty much puppets in that show, but there is a bit of CGI enhancement. I think they do it on the faces as well a little bit to like have a little bit more articulation than just a hand inside of a foam face. Head.
The Gethrum in this looked the most like it was just a person walking around in a costume.
Yes,
I found
because it was.
But
exactly
it was still like really cool looking and kind of unsettling. I found.
Yeah, I like how like when they first call them out onto their little plateaus or whatever when they're surrounding the crystal, and like the way they just kind of like stop and there's all this dust and the legs kind of like keep jittering, because I feel like they probably were like moving something around inside there to like
Yeah.
But I haven't watched any of the making of stuff for this, but I did watch the making of for the Age of Resistance show, and it's actually more interesting than I found the show to be. I was like, wow, this is all so cool.
I was very frustrated by the fact that the Age of Resistance is on Netflix and a making of, but I actually bought this movie off Prime because I couldn't. The seas had no bounty on this day. No quick bounty.
Yeah, I ended up buying it on Xbox.
Yeah, I got it I rented it in HD off of Amazon, and it looked fantastic. I can't believe how good this movie looks when it's upscaled to 1080p. I'm glad I didn't watch like a 720 like shitty internet copy, because they must have remastered it at some point.
Oh yeah, it's been re-released like 10 times since it came out.
Yeah.
Including a Blu-ray, I believe. But
this fucking movie is 40 years old, guys.
Yeah, and it looks great, but there's some seams that show at points some of the optics and rotoscoping and rear projection and matte paintings. The matte paintings look amazing.
Matte paintings were good, except for the matte painting of looking down the pit. I thought looked really bad. I thought it looked really like it looked like a cartoon. But anytime that there was like a background matte painting, they always look great. And I didn't really notice any rotoscoping really. But I feel like I can kind of see it in my head. Come on, Steve, calling you out. Just kidding. I didn't say that to call you out. I legitimately don't remember. But this is the era. I know there was like lightning and stuff. That was probably
right. Sorry, I was wrong. I had to look up rotoscoping. I used the wrong word. It was the when they project the images behind them, you can see like the white line around them.
The whole ending of the movie. You mean when?
Yeah,
there was so much unnecessary rear projection.
Yeah, and there's a couple of parts throughout where that happens, but I think they probably just couldn't figure out how to make it look tranquil and heavenly without building a million different sets, and they just wanted to like, let's just use this set and we'll figure it out later,
and also keep it at least all looking the same. Like if they just cut to Agra and she just had like a perfectly white background that was clearly like her on like in the same room as the background, and then they cut to the spectral beings ascending to the heavens with the Gelflings sitting in front. It was so weird too during that scene where he like looks up and it's supposed to be a big deal that he's like crying tears, and it looks so like so cheesy.
Just like, all right, don't blink. It's a puppet.
Don't blink the puppet. We've tried this 45 times.
ILM worked on it. They did a lot of the special effects for that stuff that we're talking about right now. But it was the early days, they hadn't even gotten to Return of the Jedi yet, where they had perfected their abilities.
Which still has all the same kind of effects in it, really, like the same kind of animatronic and puppeteering, the same kind of it wasn't CGI at the time, really. It was more like they just put it like the electricity when Palpatine's like, unlimited power.
Yeah, that's rotoscoping, where you basically like paint onto the film itself. Yeah. There wasn't a ton of that, but like no one was really casting magic balls at each other in this movie as I had thought they would.
That's true. I thought there was going to be more actual magic. I did like there were a lot of like scenes that went on too long that clearly pad this movie out, and that's when movies that have really long padded out scenes for no reason are very much, that's a kids movie trope. One that pops into my head is just the fucking Skeksis eating for like 5 minutes. I was like, why am I watching them all have different ways of eating? I guess it's fun, but the other one that I did like was when they're hanging with the podlings right before they get invaded by the Gethrum, and they're just partying, man. Yeah, they're little gnome.
Those guys make me the most uncomfortable.
Why? Because when they have their essence sucked out of them, they look like nightmares.
Yeah. And I don't know, they just look like a pantyhose full of dirt. Like this, kind of nasty looking to me.
Ziprit said it's nice to see the three Bagusis together. Just as a side.
Am I a Bagusi?
We should all get a sword that says Bagusi on it.
The Bagusi boys.
Clank
actually, earlier when I said we should have bios on our Twitch, I was thinking you should draw the three of us, and then we should have little blurbs under us that are like that sit like right underneath the video when you're on the internet on the browser.
Famous quotes.
Famous quotes like everything is Final Fantasy.
Yeah. and Steve's is, how do I get out of this Final Fantasy corner? They keep pushing me back in. They won't let me leave.
And then Kalen's quote has nothing to do with Final Fantasy, just completely non sequitur.
It's just, what is Final Fantasy? Question mark. Amaka cream.
There was one moment where they're going through like the forest or something, and he's like in a swamp or something like that. And I don't know why, but it reminded me of Princess Bride for like a quick second.
It's another movie of this from this era, you know, like I can see that.
Yeah, because
they had those
crazy studio sets, and the rat puppet, and it's because it's a fantasy movie. That's why it reminded you.
I wish there was one human in this movie, and it was just Andre the Giant was just in it for some reason. Because he was
a peanut.
He was like he was a rock level famous in the 80s. So, you know, they didn't use him that often, but when they did, it was a banger role.
He was great in The Princess Bride. Did you know that apparently there are Princess Bride sequels? I didn't even know that existed.
What?
I think they're straight to DVD bullshit from the 90s.
Only the Deadpool one. That's the only one I know.
What?
The like very Deadpool Christmas or whatever, where it's kind of like a Princess Bride kind of parody.
I don't know if that's considered a sequel.
Also, is it animated or is it a comic book?
It's the movie, but it's like a PG version of the movie, and Deadpool has kidnapped what's his name, Fred Savage or whatever, right? Fred Savage, and and he's like doing the thing that Columbo does, where he's reading the story of Deadpool to him.
Actually, yeah, I think I did see that. It's like a web video, right?
I don't know if they've made a physical version of it.
Seems like a DVD extra for Deadpool 2.
Well, it was a theater release, and you can like find it on the internet, like download it. I have to
look this up because why does it feel vaguely familiar?
I think it's called A Very Deadpool Christmas or something like that.
Very Deadpool Christ Mass special. Once Upon a Deadpool?
Yeah, that's the one.
Wow, it exists.
It does exist.
What is Deadpool Christmas? Somebody was just like straight up. We might have to watch this trailer on the trailer show this week.
We should write it down this time because the last time we forgot what we were talking about.
Amica?
Amica?
Yeah, we'll have to investigate this. I think it has something to do with Deadpool 2 because Fred Savage was in it, or he kidnaps Fred Savage.
Yeah. It's not Deadpool 2. It's like Deadpool 1.5.
Cool.
It's worth a watch. It's basically just like, it's like you could watch just their scenes as its own thing, like a bonus feature or whatever, which I don't think they've actually put on the DVD. I'm sure there's a way to buy it somehow, but it's like it's a PG version of the movie, and then they have it spliced throughout with scenes with him and Fred Savage.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Cool. You guys want to hear some more of the story? Also, a reason why I wanted to do the story like this is because this is kind of like a storybook that we did. So I'm reading the story to you guys like it's a storybook. I'm sure it's super boring, but it's a podcast. So when we make the audio version, this will be.
Can we talk about the duality in life and that we need both good and evil to be whole?
I love to talk about the duality of man, but that's more of like a final act conversation. So this one's long too. Let me just get through this. Jen and Kira discovered a Gelfling civilization with ancient rain describing the prophecy, when single shines the triple sun. What was sundered and undone shall be whole. The two made one by Gelfling hand, or else by none. They are interrupted by Skeksis.
What?
Skeksis, who reveals the prophecy was the reason for the Gelfling genocide. Genocide, they don't say genocide in this movie, while trying to trick them into coming with him to the castle. But the Gelflings run off and reach the castle on land striders. Those are those nightmare beasts that they ride around on, intercepting the Githrum that attacked Kira's village. While trying to free the captured podlings, Kira, Jen, and Fizzgig descend the castle's dry moat, revealing Kira has wings, and use the catacombs to gain access. But they are intercepted by Skeksis, who attempts to drag them to the other Skeksis when they refuse him further. Jen stabs Skeksis' hand with the Shard of Defiance. See, they didn't say that it was called the Shard of Defiance, did they? Maybe Augra said it at one point. Which leads to his mystic counterpart, Steve Ursel, to receive.
Did I do that? Did I shatter the Dark Crystal?
Receive a similar wound on his, and Skeksis, in a fit of rage, buries Jen in a cave and takes Kira. Skeksis is reinstated as Chamberlain and gives Kira to the scientist, Skektek, to be.
He's the robot Skeksis.
I am Skektek. To be drained of her life.
Danger!
Essence.
Danger! Gelfling
Danger, well,
on the
Skeksis.
premises. Yeah.
For the Skeksis to drink and regain their youth. I would have liked to see one fully regain its youth, though, because we only see one shot of his like skin like hardening. Argra, imprisoned in the scientist's laboratory, tells Kira to call the captive animals for help. They break free in response and free Kira while causing Skektek to fall down the crystal shaft to his death. At that moment, his mystic counterpart, Urti, vanishes in a burst of flame. Augra frees herself soon after Kira leaves and before Jen arrives. And I'm now just realizing that every single Ura and every single Skeksis have counterparts, and that's why the emperors at the beginning disappeared at the same time.
Yeah, they're all the same person.
Yeah, like
so weird. It's
and
cool.
I think that goes into
a very fantasy thing, but like
that's what Kaylin was going to ask though about the duality of evil versus dark, and you can't have dark without evil. Thing. You can't, and then
I mean, every fantasy story is essentially about that at the end of the day. Like Lord of the Rings is about that. Star Wars is about that. Final Fantasy in a lot of ways is about that.
They're all
it's just very different. Basic. It's a very basic story that they'll just expand upon, right? And this is sort of like the most simple representation of that story, where it's like one guy dies, the other guy dies because they're connected, because one is the evil part and one is the good part of the same person.
But right? The Gelflings are like I wanted to relate this a lot to Link and Zelda as well. This kind of Legend of Zelda clearly took a little bit of inspiration from the Gelflings, because at the beginning,
the guy's name with the big sword from Final Fantasy?
Cloud. Okay. The reason why I bring that up is because the whole thing with with Link to the Past games is that every generation in Hyrule, a new hero emerges, and they kind of tell a story similar to that at the beginning, where the Ura is telling Jen that like every 1,000 years a hero emerges to stop a great evil, basically. And the narrator at the beginning is like, for a time it was civil, and then a Gelfling appeared, and that, the counterpart or whatever the fuck it's called is the reason why the war is starting back up. Now the war has ended in a day. It seems like Jen and Kira just go, and they're fucking, Kira sacrifices herself and Jen gets all sad, and he doesn't really do a lot of fighting. It's not a lot of,
he stabs a crystal.
Yeah, there's not a lot of combat in this movie, which I was kind of disappointed by.
Compared to Muppet Treasure Island, where Kermit is ripping it with that sword.
The swashbuckling adventure starring Kermit versus a fucking very slow
Tim
it's
Curry.
The longest hour and a half fucking movie ever is The Dark Crystal. I saw the runtime and I was like, yes. And then I got 40 minutes in and I was like, this may as well be.
There's still 40 minutes left. I kind of felt the same way.
I was like, what else do you need? Like, why do they keep showing long ass scenes of fucking Skeksis eating for literally 5 minutes?
Because they made all those props. They're like, we got to get our money's worth out of these props. That's the other thing, is like there isn't a lot of deeper meaning to a lot of the scenes. Like a lot of the scenes are just scenes where it's like get here to there, and then we'll have some sort of exposition that's dumped by a witch or a wizard or whatever, and then it's more like we'll put them in this new interesting environment. And I know I brought up not Final Fantasy, Never Ending Story already, but the difference is like they go to one area that is like overgrown, mossy fantasy location to another area that looks pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And then it's like dusty mountain, and then it's desert. And you're just like, there's not crazy varying fantasy biomes that
biome wise, that's literally what it looks like on Earth. It literally goes like forest, swamp, dusty mountain, desert.
I know that, but we're not on Earth. We're in a fantasy world.
That's why I'm agreeing.
Snow.
I'm agreeing with you. When you see something like the Never-Ending Story, they go through like a swamp forest that has like a giant snail in it and quicksand, and then right there it's already more interesting because they're interacting with these different elements of the forest. You know, that's the only part. That's the only biome I really remember. So I'm just taking your word for it on that movie.
Well, they go to like the top of like a mountain, but it's nighttime and the sky is like full of stars, and then they go to like a crazy canyon, and then they go to a crazy blizzard world, and then
that's
like they
true.
just keep, and then it's like all, and it's not like he's traveling great distances to get to them. It's almost like Zelda, where like you just go to this edge of the map and then boom, you're in a pure desert area.
He flies Falcor and goes Falcor.
Well, Atreyu does that. No, Atreyu doesn't do that. Bastion does that at the end. He flies around making wishes or whatever to wish the world back. But Atreyu uses his horse the whole time, and then Falcor finds him dying and then saves him, and then he flies him for like 2 seconds and then accidentally dumps him off. He's like, "Uh-oh."
I would have rather watched the Never-Ending Story Part 3 because I'm more interested in how that movie shits the bed than
Jack Black's in it.
He's like he's like a teenager or a kid, right? Is he the main character of the third movie? Okay,
he's the main bully.
He's the bully. I was just gonna say, is he the bully?
But in the third one, the bullies are reading the Never-Ending Story.
So they're like
in the other
there?
movies, they're reading. They're in like a library reading it, and Jack Black is doing his like like reading through the book.
Speaking of Final Fantasy, I can tie Never-Ending Story to the Dark Crystal. No, I can't. Yes, I can, because in Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced, the whole thing is predicated on these kids being bullied, and they find a book, and they read about Ivalice, which is the place where Final Fantasy 12 and Tactics take place. So they get transported into the book, much like the Never-Ending Story, and the Numu are from that world, and they look exactly like the Ura or whatever they're called. Aru. I did it.
The Uwu girls.
The Uwus. Oh, I think Fritz actually said that earlier, or possibly Miyagi, and I was like, Uwu. I'm not going to be like one of those streamer e-girls who says Uwu. Uwu. You're welcome. Clip that, and everybody can.
We just lost 15 subscribers.
We only had 15 subscribers. We have my wife's subscription left, and she doesn't even watch anything that I produce.
Well, when you guys get a baby, she'll watch the baby.
Fair enough. But she'll get super mad when I try to put it in pictures.
Put it in pictures.
I'm making content with the baby. Stop putting our baby on the internet. Yeah. Do you want me to read this last part? It's not very long.
Sure.
All right. The three suns begun to align as the Gelflings reunite at the Crystal Chamber, and the Skeksis gather for the ritual that will grant them immortality. I have one beer and I can't read. When they are discovered and the Gethrum attack, Jen leaps onto the crystal, but drops the shard. Kira takes it after Fizzgig is thrown down the shaft by Skekung, but is saved by Ugra shortly after. Kira...
Must have been a nightmare on set to like keep track of all these fucked up names. Like
the show Bible for this movie was probably a nightmare. Kira throws the shard back to Jen and is fatally stabbed by the ritual master Skekzok. The heartbroken Jen plunges the shard into the dark crystal, fulfilling the prophecy. The Gethrum disintegrate, and the podling slaves regain their essence, while the dark stone covering the castle crumbles away to reveal a crystalline structure. That's another thing. That's kind of like the Fortress of Solitude. That's what that reminded me of, that moment. The Uwu arrive to use the crystal to merge themselves and the Skeksis into beings they once were, the angelic Skeks. The Skeks leader explains to Jen they had mistakenly shattered the crystal 1,000 years ago, splitting them into two races and decimating Thra. And that Jen's courage and Kira's sacrifice,
a classic whoopsies,
them.
or ooh, as we call it.
The Skeks revive Kira in gratitude and then ascend to a higher level of existence, leaving the crystal of truth to Jen and Kira on the now rejuvenated Thra. They're like, oh, we'll bring your friend back and thank you for saving your planet, but we're out of here.
Now we must return to our home planet. We are needed there.
A classic Poochie situation.
Yeah, they were killed by an asteroid on the way back.
Yeah. So I thought I had missed, I watched this movie pretty intently, and at the end I was like, did I miss something? Because that seemed real content dry. But I just reread it, and I could have just read that synopsis.
It's like I was saying, it kind of feels a little hollow at the end. You're just like, okay, movie's over.
Yeah.
And I think I attribute that to you not really feeling any kind of emotional connection to the main characters outside of the fact that they're supposed to be cute.
If you're 10, or even if you're 7,
if you're 10, you're just enthralled with the visuals. You're like, whoa, look at all this crazy shit. And then you start drawing Skeksis and Gelflings and whatever the other mystics.
And then you get a bit older and you start drawing Skeksis fucking the Gelflings.
Never got into that phase.
Everybody that draws their own material.
Yep.
Pretty sure I can say that that's not true.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe more so than either of you.
I'm not sure if I've ever. Wait, have I ever drawn a penis?
I mean, I've definitely drawn a penis for sure, but I've never drawn a Skeksis fucking uwu or whatever.
I did draw a monkey, or no, sorry, I drew an alien fucking a monkey.
Why?
And because that was kind of like my interpretation of where we came from.
Because that is my fetish.
That was your interpretation of where we came from?
Yeah, like people.
No, I know what you meant. I'm just like, when did you stop believing this? And please tell me you don't still believe it. That's how humans were made. Aliens fucked monkeys. And
there are theories that are sort of adjacent to that.
Theories?
Not scientific theories rooted in fact or science. Conspiracy theories.
There are theories, but who is the one that has these theories?
Anti-vaxxers primarily.
Oh, I blame it on the lead poisoning.
The magnets.
Yeah, the magnets in my body.
I'm filled with magnets. As soon as the Great Reckoning happens, I'm going to be flung all asunder.
He'll be beamed up easier than everybody else by the aliens that banged a monkey to make us.
So Delma Grimes is here and hasn't said a word until we brought up conspiracy theories. We're talking about
Sweet.
Dark Crystal.
I think this is the person that I'm going to be friends with.
Yes. Kaylin, go into Delma Grimes' chat. She usually streams from like 8 a.m. to about 11. I'm always in there. I'm the guy that's always in there being like, what's up? Steve has been in being like, what's up as well.
No, I say Star Trek, and then we talk about Star Trek.
Yeah.
Hi, Delma.
Delma Grimes, ladies and gentlemen. She actually invented Minecraft and she invented Twitch. So
oh my god,
look out for her.
Thank you.
Ascension.
Sponsor us.
Genius. She said hi. Okay. So we've run out of things to talk about for this movie. And that doesn't happen very often on this show because
a clean hour.
Well, we didn't talk about how Frank Oz co-directed the movie.
Well, tell us about how Frank Oz co-directed the movie, Steve.
I just did.
That's your wheelhouse. Oh, that's just.
Well, I mean, as most people know, Frank Oz is the voice of many Muppets, and predominantly Miss Piggy is the big one. But he also does Yoda. He's done Yoda in almost everything.
Oh, Miss Piggy and Yoda, I hear it.
Sorry, what? I was talking.
I can hear it. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just adding on, I can hear Yoda and Miss Piggy now. Like I can hear it.
You know why? They're both Frank Oz.
But
I'm pretty sure Frank Oz was also the Chamberlain, right? Because that that he keeps doing throughout the whole movie, it sounds exactly like Yoba.
Yobi?
Yobi Carlby.
Yobi,
It would have been so
Yobi.
good if they named Grogu Yobi.
Frank Oz in this movie did not play the Chamberlain.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I was about to say, I know the noise you're talking about, and I don't believe that it was Frank Oz, because I am very, very well versed in the grumblings of Frank Oz. But Frank Oz also good director too. He's directed lots of movies. And funny anecdotal tale is there was
so what you're telling me is Frank Oz was not in the Yoda suit?
No, but his hand was right up the Yoda suit's butt.
Okay. But he's very good at articulating Yoda's face to make him seem like a real alien creature.
Yeah, he's good at like pursing the lips and stuff. And also like Yoda is 100%. They spent so much time just perfecting the way that he looks and the ears moving and stuff. Like, whereas the Gelflings are just kind of like.
There was a really fun scene when they were having the memory fast or whatever the fuck thing where they were showing their memories, and for just like a second they showed Jen as a kid just like with one arm splashing in the water, and I'm like, they used that puppet for that like 5-second scene. What happens to these puppets that are used for like moments? Do they take them apart and use the materials, or are they in like a weird Hollywood vault that's just filled with puppets disintegrating?
Well, I can't speak for this movie, but I know that Gremlins 2, they made like 150 gremlin puppets and arms and all sorts of stuff, and they just auction them off, and you can probably buy a gremlin puppet on eBay right now if you wanted to, but
you can get the
depends on the movie.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle masks.
Yeah, you could. They found the originals of the Ninja Turtle costumes in like a locker, and they had disintegrated to dust basically, and they look horrifying. Delma Grimes has a theory about the aliens and monkeys thing that I assume is true because she invented Twitch. It was aliens that genetically modified Earth primates into humans, which is why our brains grew so fast. So, and she's a scientist and a historian.
Well,
I'm on Team Delma.
It's like the movie Prometheus, where the big pale marble men came down and put some shit in the water, and then we all evolved from it.
Played by Michael Fassbender, so the dongalong was huge.
He didn't play one of those
things.
He played a robot. He played an android named David.
I thought the android named David was the alien because I've never seen Prometheus. So I've only seen
maybe you should watch it because it's good.
Is it a prequel? Yeah. Is it a prequel to Alien movies? Is it in the same universe?
Yes.
Is it a prophecy?
A prophecy?
I don't know. I was going to ask if it was a Prometheus, but that's not it.
Prometheus was the guy that stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. And that's why the movie is about that, because we stole from the aliens or whatever.
Anyway, that robot's hung.
Probably. Or tiny, like the statue of David or whatever. What was I going to say? Oh, Frank Oz. Frank Oz directed a movie with Marlon Brando and Robert De Niro. And every time Frank Oz would give Marlon Brando direction, he would refuse to listen to it. So Frank Oz started having to like tell Robert De Niro to give Marlon Brando direction because he couldn't figure out why. And eventually Robert De Niro went up to Frank Oz and was like, basically he just says he's not taking any fucking directions from Miss Piggy. So disrespectful.
Seems like Marlon Brando just did that on every set he went to, though, because he had a similar thing before he read In the Heart of Darkness. He showed up to set to be like, fuck this movie. And he was just acting like a nightmare on Apocalypse Now. And then the director was like, go read this thing. And he went into, and the next day he emerged in character as Colonel Clink or whatever. Colonel Kurtz. Apocalypse Now. No?
Apocalypse Now. I don't know enough about Apocalypse Now to speak to it.
It's amazing. It's like
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it in a while.
Was it last trailer show? I think Miyagi asked what our favorite movies were, possibly the Fritz or maybe Dex. Somebody asked. What our favorite.
Yeah, and we
movies
weren't
are.
allowed to think, and I just like exploded out with The Evil Dead 2, which I don't know if I stand by that, but I am sort of dressed like Ash right now.
I said basketball like basketball because it's still my favorite comedy of all time. Oh, I've got an update from Delma. She gets all her info from the conspiracy theory subreddit, so it must be true. I go to that subreddit when shit's hitting the fan in the real world to see what the conspiracy theorists think.
Right.
And then later I realize how inaccurate it all is, because there's a lot of speculation. People like to say on that subreddit, doesn't it just feel like things are different? Doesn't it just feel like things are weird nowadays? And I'm like, yeah, because things change.
Yeah, remember we had a pandemic that like fucked up the whole planet?
Remember
Things are most
9/11,
definitely
which
different.
fucked up the whole socio-political climate for North America.
Yeah, now we can't make movies like The Dark Crystal anymore because everyone's too scared.
Because of 9/11.
Yeah,
That's the real
9/11.
conspiracy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've gone through most of my notes. I did my rant about Final Fantasy. I don't have a whole lot more to say about the old Dark Crystal Rooney.
I don't think so either, but I don't know. We can go into final thoughts, I guess.
We could do that. I'm just quickly, you know what? I think that I would like a Frizzgig action figure. Do we know if they ever made a Frizzgig you could take home? It did have kind of nightmare teeth, but also My Pet Monster had nightmare teeth, so
I'm sure with the television show that came out, like McFarlane
Frizz.
Toys or some shit, probably made some super articulated
no,
action figures.
You can get a Frizzgig plush.
Holy shit.
It looks too cute. But people have made like realistic looking ones with like the double teeth.
Right.
I want it.
I need it. I need it now.
It actually kind of looks like the My Pet Monster. It's got like the hard.
I had one of those
mouth,
My Pet Monsters,
and it's like furry with like the plastic eyes. Yeah, I loved My Pet Monster. My pet monster, he's a monster, and my pet or whatever the fuck.
You're singing Muppet Babies. Just so you know.
Right. Okay, yeah, final thoughts, and we'll get out of here a little early tonight. We've had a couple weeks of heavy streaming. I like playing games by myself on a different level again. But I'm going to do lots more streaming for the people because that's what they want to see. Yeah. Practical effects are the best these days. They just CGI everything. Delmograms, you couldn't be more correct.
Delma, I'm with you.
I will say my final thoughts, and then you will say your final thoughts, and then we will all go to bed. And if you don't go to bed, then you're fired from this show.
I don't know if you have the power to fire us.
Well, I do. This is I'm the boss. I'm the host this week. Whoever's host is boss for that week. Okay.
Okay. Remind me to fire you next week.
Yeah, you get fired. You get rehired.
And I'm gonna be dressed in full David Bowie regalia.
Hey, Jason, you're fired.
Are we gonna take a break for the long weekend of July? Does that sound cool?
We'll talk about it.
Or not long weekend, but like, were you saying something about like 3 for July?
Maybe we talk about this later, and then we'll make an update once we know.
We'll talk about it. We're taking an unlimited hiatus. We're not doing any more anything ever again because you're all fired and I quit. Anyway, so for final thoughts, I do really enjoy the aesthetic of this movie. I do really enjoy the fact that I was able to pick little moments out that have clearly been repurposed in other pop culture and other movies and television, and Final Fantasy specifically, and the Ghibli film revelation that I felt like was I thought you guys would think it was a bigger deal. And I was like, this scene where the thing happens in the water and then the little dinosaur guy gets eaten by the rock, I was like, that feels like one of those scenes in Princess Mononoke where you're just looking at things happening in the woods. You guys didn't react that way.
Well, I don't. Sometimes an epiphany is more of a personal experience.
More of a personal experience. You're right.
Than a shared one. Yeah.
But you're right. I had moments of levity with this movie where I really enjoyed myself and I had a lot of fun watching it. But then I get real bored, and the cracks start to show, where you see them riding the land stalkers around and they're bopping around like the puppets in Team America, you know. So I want to get, like, I would give this movie like a technical 4.5 for the time, but unfortunately the story is held up by like good versus evil. A boy emerges and must find his counterpart woman, and they must take down, like, they're almost like the good and evil, but they're not, they're both good. It's more like the good and the sacrifice versus the evil and the good. I know it's
I feel like you're about to have another epiphany.
I just had a mini epiphany.
Epiphany.
You know when you don't epiphany all the way and just have like a little tiny epiphany?
Yeah, it's like a sneeze. You're like, I can't get it out.
That's not the metaphor I was gonna use, baby.
Okay, gross.
Yeah, sorry. Metaphors. Metaphor skin. My
low-hanging fruit. Get out of here.
Okay, I'm fine. I give it 3 out of 5. It's an unfortunate 3 out of 5 because I want to give this movie a 4.5. I just can't. It's this. There's no depth to the story, and all of the lore comes in like content dumps. Fuck, I can't think of that word that I say all the time. Acquisition dumps. Exposition dumps. Also, I think Steve is frozen.
No, I think he's just
contemplating forever.
Oh, he might be frozen. Am I frozen?
No, you're fine.
Is he messing with us? Steve, are you messing with us?
No, there's no way you could sit that still for that long.
Let's try. Let me see.
Impossible. No, he's frozen on stream too. I thought we were frozen on stream.
Yeah, so, I blinked my eyes.
Kaylin, I need. Let's all do it.
Okay, let's try. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. No, let's try it again.
Yes, okay.
That'll put butts in seats. Kaylin, I need you to make your final thoughts be about 4 minutes long. Can you do that, buddy?
Yeah.
Take your
ready?
Time. I'm ready.
So, his computer just barfed itself.
Yeah, that's.
Chat with him, get him back. I will entertain our viewers. I watched this. He'll be back. So this is my first time seeing the movie. Definitely from a technical standpoint, I think it was well done for sure. The creatures did look everything I felt looked pretty good. I thought the Gelflings looked cute or whatever. There was definitely like you're saying, like they didn't have the quality to like emote or whatever, expressions. But they look cute or whatever, little woodland creatures. There was a moment, I think like halfway through or something, when when Jen cuts one of the Skeksis, and then it cuts to a shot of the Mystics traveling, and one of the Mystics' hand starts to bleed. I'm like, oh, they're connected somehow. What's going on here? And then at the end, they were once one, and then the crystal separated them or whatever. And then they were brought back together to save the day. And it just made me think, like what I was saying earlier about just the duality of in life, and we need both to be full. And also actually kind of ties in a little bit with what Steve made a comment about, I guess, Jim Henson being of the mind that kids should be exposed to things so that, they can, gives them growth, develop, be exposed to different things, which also reminds me of, I think it was something that Socrates said, which is essentially along the same lines of like, so someone who's never dealt with any hardships, when they face one or whatever, they're not going to know what to do. Whereas someone who has, been through hardships or whatever, they're going to be more able to deal with something if it were ever to occur. And the strongest of steels are forged in the harshest of situations or whatever. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you can't have good without bad. You can't have bad without good. They're kind of hand in hand. You need both to be full. And, bad things in life, if you live through them, make you better and stronger. Yeah, duality. We need to be good and bad or whatever. Actually, it also reminds me of I have an idea for a 3-disc album that maybe I'll make one day. And it's kind of like a good, an evil, and then a whole. That's all I'm going to tell you, though. I don't want you to steal my idea. Give this. You like it?
I like it a lot. Are you going to do? Because I know you've made a couple of rap tracks. Is it going to be beats that you tell stories and rap over, or is it going to be? Anyway,
I'm not sure if it's going to be rap per se, but for right now, let's say yes. Okay. It'll be some sort of musical and then rapping, real like a rap opera.
A opera.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic opera. I would say Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are kind of a rap kind of operas in a similar kind of a way.
Man on the Moon 3 was good, but it definitely felt separate from those two for sure.
He started as Kid Cudi got more popular and more famous.
More experimental.
He started, but also going more towards pop music, like not doing the stuff for him as much anymore, but doing the stuff for a broader audience. And I think that's if you listen to his mixtapes compared to his late albums,
mixtapes are so good.
Mixtapes are the best shit. And Man on the Moon 1 is the best shit. And Man on the Moon 2 is where I start to fall off Kid Cudi myself.
Right.
But anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, it's all good. It's all good. That's what I like. I like a little bit of tangents. Keeps things bouncy.
Bouncy.
I give this movie a finding your other half in life to become whole. But then it feels a little lackluster.
I mean, I was about to be like, I agree with you because I found my other half. It doesn't feel lackluster. I did find my other half. You know what
Your
I mean?
Best friend.
My best friend, who's also my wife. And it's great having a teammate. I think
that's what I'm talking
about. I feel like ultimately the story between Kira and Jen wasn't played as a love story, which is something we didn't really touch or talk about during the bulk. Oh, Steve's back, but I'm going to finish this thought because they could have leaned on that, but they did more of a later Luke and Leia, once they've realized they're not brother and sister, they do sort of a Luke and Leia thing where they seem more like just learning about each other and not. I don't think it was played for love. Did you? We didn't touch on that on the main show, Steve, but I didn't think that Jen and Kira it wasn't really played as a love story so much as a
no, not at all.
Like brother and sister almost.
Kin. They were like a kin.
Yeah, it was it didn't feel like there was meant to be a sort of romantic undertone in any way to me, but I think they were like, let's just deal with spooky shit and not have to worry about sexuality.
Speaking of spooky shit, Steve, why don't you take us home with your final thoughts? Kaylin got real deep.
Oh, too bad I missed it.
You'll have to go back and watch. It was good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
This is why we don't get trashed on the show, my guy.
What?
I don't understand.
No. I'm talking to Kaylin.
Oh, you're talking about getting drunk.
Don't get This is those moments of levity come the more sober you are. I just want to say that you can do whatever you want. I don't think we'll ever get back
You're
to.
You're trying to give me Keaton. Positive. What's that called? Positive reinforcement is what you're doing right now.
You did a remarkable job today.
I agree, and I also am sorry I missed your epiphany. Did he have one too?
He quoted Socrates, dude.
Oh,
verbatim.
Verbatim.
He added a couple or whatevers, but you know,
or whatever that guy was saying.
That is definitely one of my common like talking trait habits or whatever.
the
Oh, there
more
it is.
you, the more you talk, it's me with ums. When I was young, I had a debate teacher who was like, "Just don't say and it took me literally 15 years to stop saying between everything. I still say like all the time, and they're little speech tics that people have. And the more that you talk, in this kind of like public speaking, you'll fill the, instead of saying or ah or like or whatever, you'll fill it with saying other words and just continuing your sentence to fill the dead air.
I
You'll
go like
see
this.
whatever, like
Can I get to my final thoughts? We'll give him some allocution lessons after this. Okay, so my final thoughts. I'm also kind of annoyed that I didn't hear yours, Kalen, because I don't want to retread anything that you might have said.
No, you're not going to retread. You're fine.
I'll try and
Delmagram said I give you guys a 10 out of 10, so that's her.
Well, we give you a 10 out of 10 as well.
It's true.
Thanks,
so
Bella.
I don't know. I think we all kind of fall into the same boat on the fact that this movie wasn't exactly what we were expecting. But you know, we're adults. This movie's not made for us. It's made for tiny children. And I'm sure that if I had watched this on VHS from beginning to end as a kid and not just snippets here and there on cable when it was playing during the holidays or whatever, I might have had a softer spot in my heart for it. I might have enjoyed this watch through a little bit more. I am interested to go back and watch the series now that I have watched the movie from beginning to end and have context for it, though I think that it is sort of its own sort of story separate from this. They kind of deal with the same sort of themes, but hopefully it's a little less hollow in terms of how you feel about the characters. That is one of my main complaints about the movie that I've said throughout the review so far, has been that I didn't really care about any character in this movie. It was more about the value in terms of an art form, something that we don't really see a lot of anymore, unfortunately, because to do a production like this, it's ridiculous to have an entire story told specifically through very beautiful looking puppetry. And you know, you have to have a group of masters in the room to be able to pull something like this off. It's not like making a normal movie. They've got to build a set that's 6 to 8 feet off of the ground, so you've got a bunch of people underneath with their arms going through the ground, right? And you know, a lot of these costumes look like they probably would take more than one person to operate successfully. And I think that's where the value of this movie exists. It's a piece of art history that is worth watching, if nothing more than for that value, is to watch the vision of a genius storyteller really shoot for the stars. And you know, maybe the final result isn't as great as it could be, but for what he was trying to achieve, it's really beautiful to look at. I will agree with you, Jason, that after the first sort of opening monologue and the scene of, you know, the emperor dying and the battle over who's going to hold the emperor's scepter after that, I kind of started to, like, my eyes were drifting to my phone. I'm like, no, I have to concentrate. Must not go on TikTok. I need to watch these puppets solve the problem.
They should remake this movie on TikTok, and I bet it'll get 1 billion likes.
You know, even the potato people that I didn't really, kind of made me more uncomfortable than anything else in the movie. Like, there's still value there to take in. The music is amazing throughout the movie. I've been using the music from the Dark Crystal in my D&D campaigns and stuff for years, without ever having that sort of nostalgic value connected to it. It evokes imagination when you listen to it. If you listen to it completely separately from the movie, you start to, you know, find yourself imagining, wondering, and picturing things not necessarily connected with this, but wherever your own mind kind of flows and ebbs from the music itself. The art that this was based on is truly worthwhile if you're into illustration at all. All of the work by Brian Froud is really cool, and you can find a lot of it online. But you know, I'm considering maybe even purchasing one of these omnibuses, just because I've got a lot of art books and I like them. I like to look at them. You know, inconsistency between visuals with the special effects, I can let go and just sort of like focus on the matte paintings and the puppetry and the craftsmanship and the costumes and the monsters and all that kind of stuff. It's really great. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to give this movie one giant crystal with a big old crack in it.
I'm just looking at Brian Froud's work right now. That's an excellent rating for this too, because I do like the framing of the story, that it's like they just had to get a piece of a crystal back to another giant crystal, and as soon as they don't even really explain that till well into the movie, but as soon as I was like, oh, it's a crystal with a crack in it, they gotta get the piece of it back.
But they explain that within like the first 5 minutes of the movie, right? Like that's the whole opening is them being like, this is what you're about to see. And you're like, okay.
They could have made this movie 84 minutes long, and it would have been, just take that scene of the fucking eating out. Sorry, I just to go back to my previous thought. I'm looking at the Brian Froud stuff, and it's very iconic. I remember this more than the Dark Crystal. I remember this style of art, and it looks like he did a concept art for next week's movie Labyrinth. So
yes,
I'll be able to talk about him some more.
Yeah, I might see if I can snag a copy of the book if it's not like $200 or whatever, and I'll show it on the camera. I'll be like,
I have a Final Fantasy omnibus that I have that's like 3 books, covers all the games up to like Final Fantasy 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun to just leaf through. It's fun to look at the work of Yoshitaka Amano, I think his name is. I know the last name is Amano.
I have a Leonardo da Vinci book.
Sweet. Yeah, Yoshitaka Amano.
It's not a contest, Kaylin.
I have a Leonardo da Vinci book. Okay, well, we all have.
I just wanted to play too.
It's similar. Yoshitaka Amano does all of the Final Fantasy artwork in a very similar way to Brian Froud doing a very specific type of artwork as well.
Final Fantasy on PS5?
There's multiple. Yeah, you have access to multiple Final Fantasy games. So
maybe I might play it for the first time. Can we both play it?
We'll talk
about
the
MMOs. There's not really any.
It doesn't. They're very, very much single player Japanese RPGs. But I'll Sherpa you through the games if you want to try them out. I'll tell you which one to play first. Probably
should I do the first one first?
No, Final Fantasy 1 will bore you to no end, and that's.
What about the one with the big sword on the cover?
That one maybe should be where you go first, because they made a full-on remake of that. That it has the best graphics on the console, arguably. Anyway,
welcome back to the Final Fantasy corner. Somehow we got back in this corner again.
Let's close this chapter of Hey, Did You See This One? What do you say?
Did you guys think that the Never-Ending Story sounds like the story just before Final Fantasy? Final Fantasy comes after the Never-Ending Story.
What, are you, some kind of goddamn genius? That's the best thing I've ever heard.
Do you think that's where Lamb Chop's Play Along got their idea for the theme song?
Yes, I do.
This has been another episode of Hey, did you see this?
No, that's not when you say that yet.
I know, but it is, because I got to say that, and then I say for Kaylin and Jason. And Steve says for Jason and Kaylin, and then you say for Jason and Steve, and then we say, hey, did you see this one? And then I just did all the work for us.
Thanks.
For Jason and Kaylin, I am Steven.
For Steven, and for Kaylin, I'm Jason.
I am going now. For Jason and Steven, I'm myself.
So close. Almost nailed the intro, almost nailed the outro. And I have to ask you, as always, hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
And ladies and gentlemen, hey, thanks for watching.
Bye.